Good day and welcome to Rocket with Chief. My name's Daniel Robus and I'm your host today. I was watching a movie with the kids yesterday. It was Tasha's turn to choose. So we ended up watching The Beast, which was blaring from the TV. Great soundtrack. At one point, my eldest daughter said, "Wow, I love the true diversity and inclusion this movie has in it. They're all races, all ages, all sorts of disabilities in one crew, and I love it." Then it struck me that our children are aware of this on a visceral level. They feel the inclusion or the lack thereof in every situation. But how do we bring it into the office in a positive, meaningful way? Well, I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, and therefore I went and found one. Today we meet Dominic Gaobepe, MD of Cohesion Collective, or Coco for short, specialize in equality, diversity, and inclusion training, assessment, and advisory. Dominic also packs a whole lot more into his life. He's the author of an upcoming book, Change Your Story, Change Your Life. He is a voiceover artist, a TV presenter, business owner, HR professional, choir member, and conductor. Dude, you got to tell me all of this. How do you do all of this in one life? But who do you sing for at the moment?
Who do we think? Funny enough, we've just had our former choir conductor reach out to us because I used to be in the KZN youth choir. So over the past 20 years, as he's been conducting, they've been now old choir members. All of us now starting families in our 30s, in our 40s, saying we miss doing the singing.
Yeah.
So he's now called us back and they're based there in Pretoria. But besides that, I do some singing with my wife, even though she will complain that I don't sing with her as often as she'd like me to. But it's because she's a proper songbird. She's a proper vocalist. Me, I just support there with the bass. But yeah, I mean, we sing together, we worship together, and it's what still maintains the connection between the two of us.
That is so cool when you can
Yeah,
connect on the high low and get the
yeah,
harmonies right. I live in a family where there is music everywhere.
yes.
And I've been told that I have a voice for the silent movies. So
Uh,
yeah, I'm not allowed to. Um, on a serious note, I think that's a wonderful thing to share with anyone.
yeah,
And I do come from a theatre kid background, so our home is also full of song. Dominic, you're about to be a published author. Change your
yes.
story, change your life. What prompted you to write this book? And give us a 30-second
Yeah.
synopsis of it.
I think a high level of it is really coming from a background where you're born within a society, you're born within a structure where everything around you communicates that you will not amount to much. And then you're needing to overcome all of that in order to become somebody in life. And really, it comes from the understanding that regardless of the challenges that we get born into, we still have that personal agency and choice regarding how we respond to it. And so
Wow.
even if a kid is born in the really terrible circumstances, but the good news is we could still be able to have the opportunity to choose how we end up. We can be born into it, but we don't need to remain in it.
Dominic, is this written for a kid in Katlehong, or is it written for a young man who's living in Alberton who feels
Yeah,
outcast?
sure. It's actually written for any human being. As I've grown in my life's journey, the more I realize that each human being actually experiences struggle in their lives. Sometimes I might not see Daniel's struggle as my struggle because there's certain things that I had needed to overcome, beyond what Daniel needed to do. But it does not mean that Daniel has not struggled. So each of us get born into stories, and it's incumbent upon us in changing that story to truly begin to become who it is that we could be versus playing into the script.
Awesome. How's the process of creating a book been?
And my wife has been far more successful at it. So she released hers 2 years ago called The Lost Bride, but that was a very conscious decision that we made as a family.
What
I
is her
wanted to
name?
release
You've referred to her as my
Bate.
wife twice.
So Bate Lisile is a full name, but for short Bate. So like Sade, Bate.
Yeah,
And she
awesome.
wrote the book The Lost Bride, and she's been able to
Amazing.
what do you call? publish that and get it out. So now we need to work on this project and get that project out. But really, she's been instrumental in helping me put together, because it's actually quite a process. You need to focus on it. You need to plan for it. We need to find the designs before we can get it out there. But yeah, but I'm grateful to have one that can have my back and support me the way
It's
in which I need.
amazing. We
Yeah.
self-published a book for our 15-year-old as well. And
Yes.
wow, it's tough. You know, it's
Uh-huh.
having the poems and having the stories there,
Yeah.
unless you have a platform, it's very tough. It's very tough. So good luck for you too. What's your biggest learning you've taken out of this?
Uh, Priorities are important here.
Okay.
I think prioritizing, because our time will go towards that which we prioritize.
I love that.
And even right now in my life, I'm beginning to rejig my own thinking, because I think my work is taking too much time, rather than the time I need to dedicate to my marriage and my family. And so I'm in a point in my life now where I'm wanting to be very deliberate with that. How do I prioritize, but make sure I back that priority with the time investment that needs to go into it?
We've got enough accountants. We don't have enough dads. We have
Yeah,
enough. We have enough
certainly.
CEOs. We don't have enough good husbands. I'm with you. With our divorce rate in South Africa, these fatherless homes.
When families fall apart, we get surprised. But if you actually follow it logically, it's bound to fall apart if we don't invest in it.
Yo, preach it, brother. Preach
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
yeah,
Dominic, you have an interesting focus with Coco. This
yeah.
inclusion, this diversity, this is quite a scary thing, but isn't it a busy road to be on in South Africa? Aren't there a lot of fly-by-nights doing this?
I'm pretty certain they are. Right. Because when you think about these matters, given our history, these are things that people have lived. And so anyone in theory could be able to do this work if they actually, alive to the nuances of it, want to figure out how it is that they problem solve. It's not like studying to be a doctor or an accountant or an engineer or a pilot.
Yeah.
It is things that are social. But that which is key, though, is how do you use these social lessons and apply them in ways that are constructive to organizations, right? The work that I do is not often positive, but to the best of my ability, I try to ensure that it is constructive, because by the nature of the work that I do, I'm often in rooms having conversations with people that they don't want to have, all right? Things that they'd rather forget, things that they'd rather not look at, things that they'd rather not deal with for different reasons, whether it is hurt, whether it is trauma, whether it is guilt, or whether it is just an indifference because it's all just so, overpowering, trying to deal with it all. So people don't want to deal with it. But we need to come into that space and say, but we do need to look at it, because if we don't look at it, we will continue to perpetuate an injustice. If we do not grapple with it, we will continue to breed divisions rather than recognizing that in that healing, even though that healing might be traumatic, on the other side is actually far greater of a benefit than just letting a wound fester and hoping that nobody will notice it as we go through the process.
So before I ask you what makes Coco different, what is the one thing you wish every business owner, every employee, and every participant understood about EDI?
That human beings are always themselves outside of our organizations and inside our organizations. All right. In our organizations, we'd like to say people must just be professional. And by that, it is an unsaid agreement that when we come into an organization, we now all hereby agree that we're going to leave all of our gag at home. Okay. When I arrive within the space, I'll just be the sanitized human being that is neutral, that does not have any challenges or issues. But we come with them. All right. We learn to suppress them within professional settings, but we come with them. And it's also appreciating that beyond that which is personal, the socioeconomic challenges people bring with them to work. They've learned how it is that they need to work with them and to try to overcome them. But some people, as a reality, are still waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning. to catch the taxis in order to arrive within the workspace, right? That is a reality. And if employers are not alive to that, we might begin to look at people as being lazy, or they're not keeping the time, they're not timeous, or they just don't care if we do not understand the challenges that they're needing to overcome in order to be there. And another cool example actually was a law firm that were doing some work within Santon. And they went on this whole drive in attracting different graduates from different backgrounds. And this particular year, they were quite deliberate in getting candidates from previously disadvantaged backgrounds. So they get there, they ensure that they've got everything that they need, and they're giving them laptops and so forth. And one of the candidates said, "Thank you very much, but this laptop is a target on my back." When I'm traveling to, Pretoria every morning and coming to work. And so I can't take it home with me. But it needed somebody to listen to that, though, in order for that employer to solution for the individual.
Wow, wow, wow. And because we live in Sandton and Fourways, we forget what it's like to take a taxi to Nugget Street and from Nugget Street to Soweto or to Attridgeville,
Yeah,
or where, yeah.
100%.
Now, you must get it quite often where you get, because we don't have, we from a different ethnicity who says, "But I'm tired of always being blamed for this stuff." Is that how
Mm,
people are still seeing EDI? Do they see
sure.
it as Dominic walking in, this guy carrying the flame to burn our
Yeah,
business down,
yeah.
or have we moved past there?
It's still a bit of that, and another one, other people recognizing it's constructive. And there was a session I was running in Gqeberha last week, and one of the participants actually said, so this was a white Afrikaner male. And he said, "I understand why we celebrate things like June 16, but, whenever things like June 16 and, things like Sharpeville Massacre get brought into the media, for me, it's not lekker, because it seems like it's this club that constantly gets pulled out in order to punish, in order to blame. And can't we just get over this stuff and figure out what can we get around a South African that unifies us rather than that which divides us?" So that's often the feeling that comes through. What can we get behind that can unify us rather than divide us? And often I say, it's my fundamental belief that we as South Africans collectively have not dealt with our historical context, hence why it keeps tripping us up. Okay. It is my fundamental belief as South Africans that although the United Nations declared apartheid as an example as a crime against humanity, I don't think all South Africans view it as such. If we did view it as such, then why are we having court cases in the Constitutional Court in 2022 to say that we need to accept the apartheid flag as free speech in the new democracy? All right. So if we accept that it's a crime against humanity, then why are we seeing these things keep happening within our societies and space? And so for me, essentially the conversation I have with people within organizations is, as ugly as it is, let's look at it and let's separate two things here. The one is guilt versus responsibility. Guilt is something that you ought to feel for something that you have done. All right. I've caused it, I did it, and here's a consequence, and therefore I feel guilty for it. All right. Responsibility, however, calls us to a higher sense of our being. Right? I didn't personally do it, but when we now find ourselves with this mess that we've inherited, how do I now take responsibility, recognizing that I'm a South African that wants to build a South Africa for all who live in it? How do I now take the responsibility in order to get to a more just society? Not because I'm guilty of it, but because I realize we've all inherited this rubbish, but somebody needs to put it in order. And I choose to put my hand up to say, I'll be part of the process of putting it in order and in unifying.
That tough. Which is most important, ED or I?
All of them. All right. Diversity is important from this perspective. You shared the story regarding your daughter and the movie that she saw, and she was, I know, speaking to the people of different diversities. I cannot tell you, Daniel, how many fully grown adult human beings that I've met who are colorblind, all right, who don't care whether a person is black, pink, blue with purple stripes. They see people as people. And I say, I understand the sentiment from which it comes. Bless you, but you're lying. And the reason I know that you're lying is because when we engage with the kids that are 5, 6, and 7 years old, they'll tell us about Jessica, their peach friend.
Mm.
All right.
Mm.
And Daniel, the caramel friend. All right. And Tabo, the brown friend.
Mm.
And Zunaida, the cinnamon friend.
Mm.
And so if they can see brown, peach, caramel, and cinnamon, they most certainly do see difference. They do see color, much like we do see color as adults.
Mm.
All right. But the lesson that we need to learn from our kids, however, is they haven't quite been indoctrinated yet in the beliefs that we hold as it relates to that difference.
Mm.
So diversity is important from that perspective first. There's nothing wrong with our differences. That which we need to deal with within ourselves are what are the judgments, the stereotypes that we've learned as it relates to difference. All right. The inclusion part is important because oftentimes organizations will say, look at our staff. Okay, we've got everybody. All right. We've got people of different sexual orientations. We've got people that are disabled and now in wheelchairs. We've got people across multiple race groups. Look at even our women representation within our space. But then your employees are still saying, but as a woman, I feel like I need to work twice as hard just to be recognized and taken seriously within this organization. That speaks to something. Yes, I'm here. You've recruited me. You've got my diversity, but I don't really feel included. I don't feel like I can be myself. There's an expectation of something that I need to assimilate to in order to be taken seriously within the space. All right. Let me go to a more crude example. The way in which I speak the English language is something that was deliberate. All right. Because I realized at the age of 11, going to former Model C schools, when I was moved from the township schools to the former Model C schools, that as a Black student in those former Model C schools, the way in which I had a command of the English language, the way in which I expressed myself seemed to be equated to my level of intelligence. Okay, the more I began to twang, the greater respect. I was now leadership potential. With just the township accent, I was just another dude, another township kid that is there. And so I had to learn how to navigate the space in the way in which I express myself and I show up within the world. And our organizations are no exception. There is a mold that people need to, assimilate to in order to, be taken seriously within spaces. And when they can't assimilate into that mold, they'll often tell you about these things that I don't feel like I can be myself. I don't feel like I can speak without being, victimized within the space. And the E part, the equality part, and I love how the South African Constitution defines it, that equality is not actually about treating everybody the same, but recognizing that given our history, different people might need to be supported differently to enable them to access the same opportunities. Right? Often we miss that. We're like, nah, equality is about sameness. No, but given our history, with that candidate that's coming from Katlehong having to carry a laptop, we might need to support it differently from a Tom that lives in Morningside regarding how it is that they can access our workspace and can be able to do their best. So how do we support different people differently to enable them to access the same opportunities? All right. And yeah,
So
and last point.
how do you bridge the divide now? You said
Yeah.
you 30, 40 and where I'm getting to varsity with
Yes.
my eldest and not that she's going in there, but I've heard these
Yeah.
discussions. She won't get into medicine because she needs a 95 average, whereas
Yeah.
a black kid needs an 85 average. Why is that
To
fair?
access. Sure.
How do we bridge that divide when
Mm.
the two kids both come from four ways and they
Yeah.
both come from the same school, and
Mm-hmm.
the dad's driving a GLX and mom's driving a Maybach, and I
Sure.
can tell you I'm not. So how do we bridge that with trying to build a
100%.
society?
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's a bit of a blunt instrument in that you're working on averages, all right? In that the averages of that black family that's living in four ways and driving a Range Rover, they are less than 1% of black South Africans. Literally less than 1% of black South Africans.
But
And so when we look,
they're more than 50% of white South Africans.
yeah, all right, but tiny where the black population is concerned. And when you look at things like entrance to university, let me share it in stories actually, because I think stories always land
I love
principles a
that.
little bit better. All right. So, for example, when I was in grade 5, I remember my mother helping me with homework, and there was a particular question that was asked, and she was trying to help me. And eventually, on that particular day, I could see her eyes just glazing over. And I began to realize my mom cannot help me beyond this point. My mom only had a grade 10 or standard 8 education. All right. So from that point onwards, I knew I was on my own. All right. And at school, I used to believe that there were certain students that were just inherently smarter than others. That the ones that achieved the 80s and 90s and had the white blazers were just naturally more intellectually inclined than others. All right. I then was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship in my matric. I went through to Rhodes University. When I was in high school, I dropped my mathematics from higher grade to standard grade, moving from grade 11 to 12, because the
Okay.
advice was maybe just do this thing standard grade and make sure you shoot the lights out of it, because higher grade, even at D, is not guaranteed. And I thought that I could not deal with mathematics high school level.
Sure.
I get to university, I'm doing a degree, and then find out in my second year I need a credit in financial mathematics, university level. I am freaking out because I couldn't do higher grade in high school. How would I handle financial mathematics in university? But a few things had changed in university. All right. I was not waking up at 4 a.m. to make it to school at 7:30, oftentimes living off just one meal a day. I now had guaranteed 3 meals a day, right, where I was. I was in a spot where I had my own room and bed. This was wild. First time in my life when I get to university, whereas I was sharing a space and needed to study at odd hours for the house to be quiet enough to be able to focus when I was younger. I now had access to students and lecturers and people that I could ask questions in order to refine and help my own thinking when I was in university. And as a result of that, I was one of the top 10 students, financial mathematics, university level. Okay. If you looked at my marks coming into university first year, all right, you wouldn't thought that I was really bright. There was a change in support that I received, though, that now enabled me to do far better within the space. And so to go back to the question regarding, for example, within medicine, yeah, we must acknowledge that it feels unfair, all right, to say you need to qualify given 95% versus this one that needs to score 85%. But it's because we're using a blunt instrument that recognizes from an averages perspective that the other students that are not white are probably needing a bit more different and relevant support to get them where it is that they need to. Not because they're not smart enough to get there, but often they've not had the resources to enable them to be their best. All right. It's much like our Springbok rugby team. When the quotas were introduced, people were up in arms. And when the team was doing badly, yeah, telling you, it's those bloody quotas. You've got people in the team who don't deserve to be there. If it wasn't for the quotas, we would have players that would enable the team to do well. And then all of a sudden, when we picked up the World Cup, all of a sudden we were all hashtag stronger together. Okay? And nobody was criticizing the quotas and how it is that the team was losing leading up to the World Cup. And so the work that I do and how it is that I challenge, managers and leaders is number one, we do need to acknowledge when people say it feels unfair that I'm held to a higher standard. But if we can be able to educate our people and understand from a historical context how it is that you are probably will fare better than someone from a different community, and therefore how we need to support them differently to enable them access to that opportunity. If we don't understand that from a historical context, of course, we're not going to get this right. But here's the other implication. If we don't figure out ways in providing relevant support to different people, then essentially we will just default to those which have the best access. And in the South African context, if you're white in the South African context, chances are 80% of white people come from middle class families, chances are. All right. And so if we don't understand that supporting different people differently, we can essentially perpetuate the same inequality, saying we can't find good Black accountants, we can't find good Black doctors, we can't find good Black actuarial scientists. If we don't support them, we will not create them.
There's a lot there to unpack when you're 48 years old and you come from my background. There's a lot to
Yeah,
unpack, and that's why it's a hot conversation. It's a tough
it is.
conversation to have, and it's why we should be having more and more of it, because
Yeah,
it's a scary thing, and the things that come to mind, the responses that come to mind, they sound churlish when I make them.
yes,
It's like
yes,
almost asking, is there a space then for me in South Africa? Is there
100%.
do I belong here? And that's when you see
Yeah.
these long queues of people exiting.
Mm.
90% of them seem to look like
Yeah,
me, not like Dominic,
sure.
and
Yeah.
that just irritates me. Anyway,
Mm.
um,
Can I share this one quick story
of
with you quickly?
course,
All right. So I'm asking some kids at a high school, how many of you have your parents told that you must get your education, get your degree, and get out of the country because there's zero opportunity for you? Of the kids that raise their hands, all of them are the white kids. I say, please keep your hand remaining in the air if you've actually applied for a job. And all of those hands went down. But these grade 8s to grade 12s are clear. We must get our degree, get out because there's zero opportunity for us. All right. I then said, first of all, I need to acknowledge probably where that is coming from, and that your parents are looking at society. They're looking at policies like employment equity. And to them, they're saying, does my son, does my daughter have a future in South Africa? And therefore, being a parent that loves and wants to protect and wants the best for you, get your education, get out so that you can find opportunities. I said, let's acknowledge that first, all right? But now that we've acknowledged that, let's now deal with reality. Are you aware as young people that of all the young people that were employed in corporate South Africa for the very first time in their lives, if you took that entire population, 52% of them in the past 2 years were young white South Africans? No. Okay. Are you aware that in the past 2 years of all promotions that have happened in corporate South Africa, 64% of those promotions have been of white South Africans? No. But the feeling persists. Get your education, get out. There's zero opportunity for you. Are you aware that as we sit in this room, 68% of top and senior management roles are held by white people in this country, even though they're only 9% of the economically active population? No. But the feeling persists. Get your education, get out because there's zero opportunity for you. Even though the young white youth in this country faces an 8% unemployment rate compared to 60% of the black and colored counterparts. So there's something here that we are doing a disservice as fellow South Africans who are youngsters. Because if we just have conversations with them, given our emotions, versus coming into grips with the reality of the country, we cause them to disengage from this country, and now they cannot be part of building and solutioning because all they're looking to do is to get out. And unfortunately, it will become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if we've got people with skills that are leaving, people that are not investing in helping to build, of course it will fall apart because we need them to help us to build. All of us, regardless of our race, all of us.
Sure, Dominic, there is a lot to think about there. There is so much to think about. And as a responsible adult, as a mentor to young people, as a parent, there's a lot that we have to hold ourselves accountable. Our words make an impact in these people's lives and where they're choosing to go. And I really love the way you phrased that. I wanted to ask you a question here. We're speaking about, you spoke about Model C school, you spoke about coming into an area which is better. Why do you think we don't have kids from Morningside going to school in Soweto now? Why have we not got these aspirant areas in Mamelodi where we've got the new St-Stithians? So we don't have people like we've seen in the East Rand. And I know we've diversified completely. We're going to education. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Talk to me about what we're doing wrong there.
From a historical perspective, let's keep in mind before 1994, all right, if you looked at the equivalent school in the township versus a Model C school, all right, for every, let's say for every rand, as an example, that was being spent on a white child, 8 cents was being spent equivalent in the township schools. So literally, even just from a finance perspective, they've never had the resources, never had the right kinds of teachers, never had the right kind of aspiration in order to enable people to survive in this society that that gives value, that really rewards, people that see things and do things from like a middle class, upper middle class perspective. All right. And also, when you think about where it is that we've come as a country, we've had political emancipation. That which we're trying to grapple with now is, what does economic emancipation look like and redress in this country? We've got a handful of people that are black and colored, given things like triple BE and so forth, that get paraded around as like, the bastions of success. But our policies, unfortunately, have just produced a handful. More than 90% of the people in our country, Daniel, live off less than 4,000 Rand per month. Okay. The fuel budget for some middle class families. 90% of our families in this country are living off to support their whole family, 4,000 Rand or less per month. Right. So given those means, of course, there won't be the kind of investment in certain schools within townships that are aspirational and enable that kind of movement that even pull kids from what do you call from suburbs, because it's been like that by design. So until you have the likes of Mutsepe, for example, who decides to do a Michael House in Soweto, right, it's just not going to happen because our structure is as such that the aspiration, the access to opportunity, the ease of travel and transportation is actually localized and centralized. And to travel beyond there actually becomes, highly, what's the word that I'm looking for? Inconvenient to be able to access. Our society, our towns, our cities have been designed. Opportunities sit within certain places, proximities within certain places where our malls are at. And therefore, that's why you find people moving in rather than moving from the suburbs to go elsewhere.
Dominic, you have put that so eloquently. I really love the way you've put it. I don't buy it. I think we break things down quickly, and we need to build up new monuments as well.
Yes.
And I would love to get longer into the discourse with you on that,
Yeah.
because I don't accept it after this long. We have had such good stories coming out of these areas, whether it's sport, academics. We've had these kids that have done so much. We have parents who love so much. And I've seen donations from corporate into these schools.
Yes.
And we are still missing something. There seems to be a collective. If there's a problem, we burn stuff. And that is an underlying thing that EDI is dealing with. And I'm so glad you're dealing with it, because
100%.
Because I'm just scared of it. I want to ask you something.
Yeah.
Where do you stay current? Where can I learn more about EDI so that when you come into my organization, I'm embracing you. I'm grabbing you by the shoulder. I'm not backing away with a cross, afraid you're going to take everything from me. What do you recommend you read?
We are in an era in the world where information is easily accessible to us. But unfortunately, because it's so easy, it then becomes very simple to be in a particular echo chamber that confirms our own worldviews rather than to challenge ourselves in different worldviews.
You're looking at that's it. So where do I go?
Sure. And so when you go to YouTube and you are accustomed to a Jordan Peterson as an example, why not Google a Dr. Amos Wilson and see what a Dr. Amos Wilson says from his perspective and understanding how it is that the world works versus what it is that we think we know. Right?
Excellent.
Rather than listening to the history just as it's been taught within our schools, there's actually an excellent resource. It was an Oxford Union address by a guy called Akala, A-K-A-L-A. So Akala, Oxford Union Address.
Okay.
If you ever thought that you knew the history of the world and of Africa, watch that address. Okay. Listen to that presentation, and it might just give you a crisis in identity regarding what it is that we thought we knew about the world.
Dude, I'm already having it. You've already given it to me. Already given it.
Can give us a crisis. All right. And also to realize that often when we've got points of disagreement, it's often not because of the facts, but because there's emotions that are involved, and these emotions are rooted within a particular history. All right. So a news agent SABC, E-News, they're in a town in the Northwest Province. This was a couple of years ago because a classroom in a school has just been burnt. Service delivery protest is happening. All right. They go there and they interview some of the community leaders and they say, we understand that, service delivery and, things are not working out. But if service delivery is the issue, why burn a classroom? I mean, this is actually an infrastructure that's here to help your children, right? And to invest in your community. Why burn when you're saying that you are, really protesting against services that you're not receiving? All right. And one of the community leaders was like, wow. He said, ma'am, I understand from your perspective why you would think that this does not make sense. Okay. You would have noticed that when you came into our town, the condition of that road is such that if it was raining, you would not even be able to access our town. The condition of the road is such that we've even had mothers who were pregnant who passed away on the road because medical assistance could not get to them on time. We sent a letter to a municipal official within our town. They said they'll get back to us and really deal with the issues that we have. They never did. We escalated to the premier of the province, and the premier said that they're going to have a meeting and sort out the needs that we have. It never happened. We followed up, and this guy had receipts, and he said 18 months later, madam, we decided to burn one classroom. Not only is the premier of the province here, but even you, ladies and gents of the media, are here listening to our plight. Often we think that people don't think their actions through. But perhaps if we understand their challenges, and it's not to condone their actions, but maybe there can be a different empathy that says, oh, if I understand someone else's story, perhaps I could understand some of their actions and rationale rather than writing them off to say they're just burning things. But maybe they thought about it and it's achieving different outcomes. We unfortunately have a country where until people make noise, things do not change. Even this very democracy that we have.
Now we're talking about elected leaders and leadership and ethical leadership. Dominic,
it is a nightmare. That's a conversation for another day. Exactly. But even there, our leaders are letting us down massively.
Why do
They're letting us down massively?
You know, anyway, I've got one more question. Where do people get hold of you, Dominic? Where do we find you?
So cohesioncollective.com is something that is great to reach at. And I've been challenged to do some more videos actually whenever I'm engaging with fellow South Africans at schools and within organizations. And so I'll be doing that a bit more deliberately over the next 12 to 18 months. Okay. But cohesioncollective.com, able to get hold of us, and we can certainly facilitate a conversation in your school, in your church, in your workplace. This is...
Wow, you've given me so much to think about. This is, well, okay. So my final two questions for you. If you could have dinner with any thought leader today, who would it be and to what would you treat them?
Wow. I think given where the current things are at, I would actually love to sit with someone like a Thabo Mbeki, who has a view behind the curtain.
Wow.
I would love to have a conversation with Thabo Mbeki. Because I would like to think that the leadership, the political leadership of our country should be alive to the challenges that we have. And I get confused when we continue to score on goals. And it seems like we as the South Africans are more passionate than our leaders. But anyway, story for another day. I'd love to sit with the Thabo Mbeki. He's a man that smokes a pipe, and I would imagine he enjoys a good tea or maybe a whiskey, I don't know. Just a relaxed environment. And just really hear from an elder who's not just an elder, but really is a thinker that could help to even shape some of my own thinking and approach.
Do you think our young leaders listen to the elders enough today?
Probably not. Probably not. But also, that being said, let me counterbalance it. Nelson Mandela, when he was in his 30s, the ANC pretty much treated him like what Julius Malema is being treated as today. Nelson Mandela was seen as the radical because he was challenging the elders of that time to say, you guys are not radical enough. You're not moving. You're not being responsive. So there is a power in listening to the wisdom from both sides. All right. The youth have that vigor and energy of wanting to change things, and the elders have the wisdom on how we can change those things responsibly. Somewhere between those things lies success, but I don't think we are having those conversations enough.
And there's that between white, black, colored, Indian, young, old, men, women. We need robust discussion, but too often we just get angry with one another, isn't it?
Anger and fear is our staple, right? We're either fearful or we are angry, but very few of us are able to pause and hold that. And rather than be offended by it, to really just hold the center to say, let me understand where that fear comes from. Tell me a little bit more about that anger. And for me to do so without judging you, I genuinely listen to you, human being to human being.
Sure. That's power. As my last question, which I wanted to ask you, is what is the one question you wish I'd asked you in this interview?
I don't know.
Oh, that's good. That means I did my job.
I don't know.
That's, it's always it's always intimidating interviewing
Yeah,
someone with your pedigree, because you've been through so many of these. So I just want to
yeah,
thank you for being so gracious and giving us your time, and so open to educating me. I think there were a couple of mic drop moments there. For me, guilt versus responsibility stands out. And I have a
yes.
responsibility to be part of this nation building. I have a
That's
responsibility to stop the bride discussions which are resulting in our young people leaving. And there is a space for white, black, Indian, color, all our diversity here. Thank you for
all of
just
us.
highlighting that. Um,
Absolutely.
Dominic, from my side, I'd like to wish you a wonderful day and all the success as you take Coco to the next level. And I hope to interview you again someday soon, maybe in person with a
Yeah,
tea or a
certainly.
bottle of
Would be amazing. Would
or a
be amazing.
beer.
Now, tea. We'll stick to tea.
The tea. From my
Appreciate it,
side,
Daniel.
Daniel
Yeah.
Robus, thank you. I'm going to let you go and have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Yeah. Thank you for this opportunity and for your time. Truly appreciate it.